Hi, everyone. We're going to begin shortly. We're going to give a couple of minutes for people to join. Thank you for being here and for your time. So, hi, everyone. It's 5:05. Welcome to our third PPCR talk. As you know, we have created this talk to keep you motivated and help you to understand what could be your next steps after PPCR. Even if you go to the clinical research path, or if you want to keep going as a clinician and merge both clinical research and your own clinician work together. So today we're honored to have Tarek Nafee. He took the program back in 2015. He was a TA and an awesome TA in our program. Sadly, he's not anymore. I'm really proud to have him. We have invited him before to be a junior faculty during the 5 days. And all the students have a great experience with him. And it's been amazing how he have developed his career here. I want to talk about that. So after PPCR, he also did a master in clinical research investigation at Harvard Medical School, and now he's a resident of internal medicine here at Boston. So Tarek, you can begin. I will stop sharing my screen and I will follow your questions here.
Thank you so much, Alma, for the introduction and for inviting me here today. Truly very excited to speak to everyone here today. It's always exciting to go back to where things all started, and I'll share a little bit about my path with you. And PPCR truly was where a lot of my career in research had started. Um, so I'm sharing my screen. Just want to confirm, can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Alma. Okay. So, a lot of you are at different stages in your careers, both clinically and in research. The wonderful thing about PPCR, we have multi specialties and multinationality. It's a wonderful international community. Everybody's doing different exciting things in their career, everywhere from pre-med students all the way through to professors already that are just interested in getting more involved in research. And of course, we have also pharmacy, pharmacists and veterinarians and different medical sciences. So clearly this talk is more geared towards those interested in pursuing in residency. I will talk a little bit more about continuing a career in research in the United States as well. So I just want to start with brief introduction about myself. I'm originally from Egypt. I was actually raised for a large portion of my life in United Arab Emirates in Dubai. And I moved to Canada for my undergraduate degree. I did my bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences at the University of Waterloo. And after I graduated, so this was kind of like a general science degree, it's kind of pre-med. I know the system in the US and Canada is a bit different where you do a pre-med before you go to medical school. After I finished with my pre-med degree, I got my first research experience, you could say. And for about 4 to 5 years, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry in what's called like a contract research organization. This was a company, or I worked for several companies that provided clinical trial services for phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. I was more involved from a management perspective, which, as I tell you a little bit more, is obviously very different from being involved in academic research. So a lot of the things that we learn in PPCR about designing a study and all that, that was not the side that I was involved in. I was more from a management and logistics perspective, basically from a business operations of a research company. And it was a very interesting experience, but shortly after I decided to enroll in medical school, I went to medical school in the Caribbean. What I did 2 years in a Caribbean island, and then the curriculum kind of took me to the US. So it's 2 years on the Caribbean island, and then I moved 2 years to the US to do my clinical rotations. It was at that time, actually, that I discovered PPCR. In about 2014, it was really funny how I discovered it, just through word of mouth. And I got in touch with the program and enrolled in the 2015 class. It came at an integral time in my life when I was, a medical student in the US alone, really didn't know very many people here, going around doing rotations at different cities. And I had this research background. It was something I was interested in, but I didn't really know how to get in touch with the research space in the United States, particularly academic research, given that my medical school was not based in the United States. In 2015, while I was a PPCR student, I came for the workshops in Boston. I think it was the manuscript writing workshop and the statistical workshop. And I met Dr. Felipe for the first time face-to-face. And I ended up joining briefly as a research intern in the neuromodulation lab that summer of 2015. Really, this opened my eyes. It was my first time I really dived into the project, the group project, and I advise everybody to really, as much as you can, and I know everybody's busy, but it's one of the most valuable experiences to put together a research protocol and really put everything you can into it. I moved on to be a research fellow in my pediatric cardiology rotation. I worked with a hospital in Chicago for many years, for 2 years actually as a research fellow. Once I got my medical degree, I actually decided to hold off applying for residency right after graduating from medical school. And I went on to be a cardiovascular research fellow at Harvard Medical School. I did that for about 3.5 years. I also, during that same time, I did my master's in clinical investigation. I did my thesis with the same mentor at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center at Harvard Medical School. So basically, just to summarize, the reason I mention this is because I came from really having very little research background. I got to delve a little bit into industry, a little bit into academic research, and I move on to combine that with my clinical training. So my journey with PPCR, as a student and then moving on to a teaching assistant, although I was busy with my clinical rotations and going through medical school, it was so valuable to stay in touch with the PPCR community. This is where it all started when I was, a medical student, 6 years ago, just alone in the US and didn't really know which way to go. And it opened my eyes to a career path that has completely changed my trajectory in life, I think, or my career anyways. As a teaching assistant 1, and then I was a teaching assistant 2, where I got to be more involved in mentoring the groups on the group project. And finally last year, it was a huge honor to join the 5-day workshop with PPCR as a junior faculty. And over the years, I must say that I've seen a huge improvement in the quality of the projects that are coming out. I was so impressed with the groups last year who presented their projects at the 5-day workshop. Many incredible projects, and really PPCR is a wonderful program that's extremely close to my heart, and I hope to continue collaborating with this program for as long as I possibly can. And for those of you who can, I do think there's a lot of added value in being in touch with this community. So really, you say to yourself, okay, I've taken PPCR, what's next? And really, there's no one answer to this. I just want to start off my talk with, there is no one answer. There is an infinite number of things you can do. I'm going to delve on a few major buckets of things that people have done in the past or could do. But that's not to say these are the only options. There's numerous options. So as you can see, I've split up here on the screen to academic research, research industry, and then pursuing clinical training. And that can be in the US or not in the US. But of course, I'm going to give a little bit of insight about what that's like to pursue residency training or fellowship training in the US. And I'm going to touch a little bit on each of these buckets. So academic research, really, when I mean academic, I mean joining an academic institution, so a university, whether it be Harvard Medical School, Harvard School of Public Health, or any non-Harvard entity. There are many universities, both in your home countries and here in the United States. So as far as academic research in the United States, there are several positions, like research fellow is a title you commonly hear about, postdoctoral research fellow. You don't need to have a PhD. You don't need to have although oftentimes people have PhDs when they do a postdoc. You don't need to, but you do need to have a doctorate level degree. In the US, an MD or a physician or a veterinarian or a pharmacist or PharmD, this is all considered doctorate level. So if you've graduated with a clinical degree, you can be a research fellow. Otherwise, you can go for something like a research. If you haven't graduated yet, if you're still a student, you can apply for research assistant or research coordinator positions at universities. How do you find these positions? You have to really narrow down some of the institutions that you want to work in, maybe based on cities or geographic location, or maybe you know somebody who knows somebody, and you have to email people who are in the field of your interest. Reach out to them. You may not get a response. You knock on 10 doors to get one reply. That's how I got my research fellow position. It's sometimes not straightforward, but you just got to keep going, and eventually you will find something that you want. There's a lot to be said about how to fund your stay in the US, how to get funding, how to get paid a salary. This is a conversation for another day. And at the end, I'll leave my contact information and we can discuss that. But or maybe in the question answer session, I could answer that as well. You could also pursue a graduate degree in clinical research, whether that be an MPH or a master's in clinical research. Those are generally the two fields. Some people go on to do PhDs in epidemiology. This is what I mean by a graduate degree in research, because what you're studying is the research methodology itself. There are different forms of programs out there, both across the US, in Europe, and other places. I'm going to touch on that very briefly. And then finally, you could do a graduate degree in applied sciences. So not necessarily a graduate degree where you're studying the research methodology, but you could do a graduate degree in immunology or microbiology or whatever field you're interested in, stem cell research, whatever you're interested in, that's another path forward. And you would learn a lot of research skills through that path as well, even though it's not a formal graduate degree in clinical research. So that's the academic research bucket. Now going to the second bucket there, it's the research industry. Big pharma, of course, there's all the big pharmaceutical companies. They're always looking for people with some sort of clinical background if you're more senior in your clinical career. And now that you understand a little bit about the terminology through PPCR, though some of the positions may require you to have more research experience outside of a course. So some may require you to have a PhD as a research scientist, some may require you to have a master's degree. So that academic research bit can help you get a job in pharmaceutical industry. And that's whether it be in your home country or in the United States. Depending on your visa status, obviously that a lot of pharma companies would sponsor you. Biotech companies similarly, and Boston is really a hub for biotech companies and for pharmaceutical companies. So it kind of works both ways. In Boston, it's really the mecca of academic medicine and pharmaceutical research. San Francisco is another hub for biotech, by the way, if anyone's kind of wants to know where to look. There are obviously a lot of startups in San Francisco, around Silicon Valley, and in Boston itself. And then there's that CRO industry, that last bullet point that I put in the second bucket, contract research organizations. There's global CROs with offices all over the world, and they hire at all levels of experience. Positions that you could look for, like clinical research associate, clinical coordinator, medical science liaison. These are position titles that are commonly used in that industry that would apply to, I presume would apply to a lot of people here, depending on your experience. So maybe if you're interested in searching some of that. Pursuing clinical training in the US through residency or fellowship, depending on, I know this talk is entitled Internal Medicine Residency because that's what I'm doing with a hope to pursue fellowship. I'm going to dive into that the most towards the end of this talk. Very briefly, there are some official requirements that you must fulfill in order to be eligible to apply. Then there are unofficial things that are unsaid. How do you apply? How do you be successful in your application? Because just because you check off all the requirements does not guarantee you a position. It's highly competitive. And so to be competitive, there are some unsaid tips and tricks that you should keep in mind. I wrote some things here like your US medical licensing examinations. You have to get some sort of clinical experience. You have to get some letters of recommendations. Those are all just absolute musts, but I should also say those are the bare minimums. It gets a little bit more complicated because it's more competitive, and we'll get a little bit into that as well. So just in brief, pursuing clinical research in the US, and back to those academic research or the industry research, or whether you're doing research actually also while you're pursuing residency training, or fellowship. There is no one path. There are numerous formulas to success. You have to be persistent. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're always learning. PPCR is a wonderful starting point. It teaches you the language. It gives you things to think about. But the only way you'll become an independent researcher is if you practice what you've learned, and you just, it's like riding a bike. You just have to keep doing it. And you never forget the things that you've learned, but persist. Think about funding always. And when I say funding, I don't mean just getting funding for your research project, although that is very important. At the very junior stages, when you're deciding to move to the US, when you're deciding to pursue a research fellowship, you have to think about how to fund yourself and how to fund your life. Life in the US is not cheap for everybody. Some people can afford it. Some people need to think about how the funding is going to happen. And there are various sources. Always self-reflect what you need to improve on. If, like I said, you reach out to 10 people, you apply for 10 jobs just to get one reply. Sometimes that number 10 is more like 100, to be perfectly honest. You just have to be persistent and build relationships. Just like anything that you do in life, whether you're in clinical medicine, you're in business, you're in research, it's about building relationships with people that you're going to mentor in the future, building relationships with people that are going to mentor you. Really dive in and put your all into it, and you will find a path forward. The intention of this slide, I'm not going to dive deep into it, but there are various graduate degrees in clinical research out there. Like I said, there's the master's in clinical research, and then there's the MPH. There are some that are course-based. So you take, a year of courses and you graduate. Some are thesis-based, that you have to complete a thesis and publish a thesis in order to graduate. So the list that I have here is, a very, very, very small fraction of what is actually out there. I just list some of the more famous public health programs, some of the more famous thesis-based masters in clinical research programs. And I specifically mentioned the masters in clinical research in Germany because it works in close collaboration with the PPCR program. I'm sure some of you or many of you have already heard about that one at Dresden. However, in the US, there are many options. What I have listed here are some of the more well-known programs, I should say, and some of them offer online options, others do not. Of course, now with the global pandemic, I presume many programs are moving online. Now, really to the main topic for today, and I'll try to make this quick so I can get to your questions. The official process of pursuing residency training in the US. You must complete US medical licensing exams. There are a lot of resources for studying for these exams. There's a step 1, a step 2, what we call clinical knowledge, or step 2 CK, step 2 CS, which is a live exam with kind of patient actors. They give you different clinical scenarios and you have to go through them. And then step 3, which is actually not required before you apply for residency, but a lot of people choose to do it before, particularly if you score very well on these. It can help your chances in some programs. But the real requirement is step 1, step 2 CK, and step 2 CS. Those 3 allow you to become certified by an entity in the United States called the ECFMG. This entity certifies foreign medical graduates, meaning people who have medical degrees outside of the US. It certifies them once they've completed these 3 steps. The step 1, recently, they've announced that step 1 is no longer going to be given a score. It's going to be just pass or fail. And similarly, step 2 CS is only pass or fail. So previously, the score that you scored on the steps really determined what type of specialty you could be eligible for, with some exceptions, of course. Some people, with average scores, we're able to get into highly competitive specialties with some of the other tips and tricks I'm about to share with you. Right now, with the step one being the exam that they used to primarily look at for the score, now the scoring system is gone. You've got the step 2 CK. All eyes are on the step 2 CK. You must perform as highly as possible in those exams. That's not to say that if you don't get the score that you want, there's no path forward. There is, but the biggest favor you can do yourself is get the highest possible score on the USMLE exams. Next, you need to get some US clinical experience, meaning you need to work with a clinician in the US. There are various ways that you can do that. I'll get into that in a bit. If you're still a medical student at this time, it's the best time, because as a medical student, your medical school can kind of send you to do a rotation with another medical school. Once you've graduated, then you're kind of on your own. Your medical school is not sending you as a student, and it's kind of the clinical legal aspect here, like hospitals have insurance that covers them in case something goes wrong when a medical student is there. But when you're a graduate, it becomes much more difficult for a hospital to take you on, but there are some opportunities. You need letters of recommendation. So you need 4 letters. I think a minimum of 3, you can have up to 4. And then on top of those, you can have a dean's letter. Well, not that you can, you must have a dean's letter from the dean of your medical school. And the dean's letter is not what you think it is. It's not just a letter from your dean saying this person is great, so-and-so is great, and they were the best student. No, the dean's letter has a very specific format that it must go into a specific format. They're looking to see performance estimates compared to your classroom, and there is a standardized format for that. Many medical schools internationally understand that. So when you talk to your dean's office, they know what the US is looking for, but there are some medical schools that don't know what that is. And if that's the case, then you have a little bit more work to do to make sure that your medical school understands that the dean's letter is not simply a letter of recommendation. It's actually a full, maybe 10-page evaluation of your performance throughout medical school. After you get all these things in order, you've got all your letters and you've got everything in order, there's something called ERAS. It's an electronic residency application system. You create an account and you pay the fees to apply for a certain number of programs. Now, you can apply to any number that you want. You can apply to multiple specialties, although I will say, if you are going to apply to multiple specialties, I recommend that they be closely related, because it will be very difficult for you to sell yourself as somebody who is interested in, neurosurgery and family medicine. Those are 2 very different applications. Your letters need to say what you're good at, and so it gets very tricky. But if you're interested in 2 very similar specialties, perhaps if you're applying for family medicine, and then you also are interested maybe in primary care, pediatrics, then you can, maybe those 2 are somewhat similar. But still, most of the time, your highest chance of success is to focus on one specialty and really put all your energy into that. You apply. The way it works is once you've sent out your application, it's one system, you pay, and on one day in September, the application goes out to all of the programs. Within the subsequent 4 months, the programs will invite you for interviews. Nowadays, again, because of the pandemic, the interviews are happening via Zoom and online, but many people are, in the past, we were doing it face-to-face, so you would have to fly to these programs wherever they are around the country, pay for your accommodation and attend these interviews. The interviews typically a day long at each place. And the higher number of the interviews that you get, the higher your chances of matching, of course. That being said, you see there's a way that a program looks at your application and decides whether or not to extend you an interview. After the interview's done, let's say, for example, you got 10 interviews and the program has interviewed 300 people. They're going to rank the 300 from 1 to 300, and you're going to rank your 10 from 1 to 10. And the computer algorithm, it's called the match system, matches you. And in March, every year, I think around the 2nd week of March, the match system releases emails to everybody telling you if you've matched or not, and where you've matched. It's a nerve-wracking 1-year process. You can only apply once a year. The cycle goes from September till March. But if you prepare for it well, it can be an enjoyable process. And you meet a lot of people along the way, and it can be quite exciting when you get the result that you want at the end of it all. So, I mean, to complete your ERAS application, it's basically like an online CV. This ERAS, it's an online CV. You go on, you put in your education, your work experience, your research experience, your volunteer experience, everything in that column on the right. This is what you need to fill out in that application. Publications, posters, awards, personal statements, letters of recommendation. This is what you need to fill out, including volunteer experiences, research experience, work. So think about what you want to put there. Think about how to make yourself competitive, because people are filling these things out and you need to put in experiences in there. And you're not just putting it in to put it in, you really have to demonstrate that. And when you go to the interviews, they can ask you about any of your experiences. So you really need to think about how you can build your brand, how you can build your CV. What are you selling to these programs? They are seeing thousands of applications. I think in internal medicine, my program receives 3,500 applications. They interviewed 300 people, maybe 250 to 300 people. 10% receive. And then out of the people who do get an interview, 10% end up in the program. So how do you sell yourself? How do you get competitive? Now, since we're in a research program and we're very data-driven people here, I'm going to show some data. This is from a document that is released by the official Match organization. It's called Charting the Outcomes for International Medical Graduates. This is the total number of applicants. And the total number of positions. You can see the column here, US IMGs, that's international medical graduates with a US citizenship. And then non-US IMGs, which is international medical graduates who are not US citizens or permanent residents. So it shows you how many applied. So I've highlighted there internal medicine, although if you're interested in another specialty, the numbers are there. 10,000 applicants, about 7,900 positions. So roughly about 2,100 applicants will not match every year. But 7,900 do match. American medical graduates, or people who have graduated from medical school in the United States, they have about a 96% match rate. So they more or less all of them match in the specialty of their interest. And in internal medicine, I think that number is probably close to 99%. So the remaining positions after the US medical graduates apply, the remaining positions are the positions that international graduates are competing for. In the next slide, this is the percentage of international graduates who have matched by specialty. So again, all the specialties are there. I've highlighted internal medicine. Again, the blue is the US citizens, but who studied abroad. So it's a US citizen who went to another country to study. And then non-US IMGs, which is most of the international medical graduates, I would say, is the green column. So you can see in internal medicine, and by the way, this data is from 2018. These numbers have changed slightly, but more or less the same. About 55% of people who apply to internal medicine residency match. How do you make yourself in that 55% and not the 45%, right? That's the real question here. This is also showing you some of the average, the mean numbers of people who matched and those who didn't match. So you can see, for example, under non-US IMGs, those who matched versus those who didn't match. Obviously, those who matched had a higher number of interviews. Contiguous ranks, that's that first thing. Contiguous ranks means how many did they rank in internal medicine. And if you ranked 7 programs, that means you got 7 interviews. On average, you matched versus somebody who's unmatched. Again, these are just means. This doesn't mean that if you get 7, you're going to match. It just means that's the average. Mean USMLE scores, you can see there. Obviously, step 1 is now going to be pass-fail. So more of the focus is going to be on step 2 score. I assume that as this rolls out, this is very new that the step 1 has become pass-fail. As this rolls out, I assume that this step 2 score requirement is going to increase because that's all they're looking at now as in terms of objective data. There's a lot of subjective things you can do to improve your chance. As you can see, the number of research publications you have, 4.6 versus 4.5, really those who matched and those who didn't match had, in internal medicine, by the way, they had the same number of research publications. So this tells you that it didn't make much of a difference how much research publications you had, whether you matched or not in internal medicine. There are other specialties where that's huge, like radiation oncology, maybe anesthesia. Many specialties, your research will matter a lot. Internal medicine, not necessarily, but once you get to the fellowship application, let's say you're interested in gastroenterology after internal medicine, or cardiology or hemonc, your research will matter a lot. So just because you're doing research earlier before residency and it's not helping you necessarily get into residency, it will help you get into fellowship, and it will help your career after you're done fellowship. As you get promoted through academic ranks, that you have done research and you have an understanding of research early in your career. Finally, what do program directors say? So this data that I'm showing here, this is from a survey that they sent out in 2018 to several thousand, maybe several hundred several hundred program directors. And the chart on the left is the factors that the program directors deemed. You can see the N is 164 people responded. So there's 164 internal medicine programs. I think in the country, there's about, in the whole United States, don't quote me on this, but maybe about 400 programs. So this is about a third of the programs replied. What they deemed important to give you an interview, versus on the right is what they deemed important to rank you highly. These are two different things. Getting the interview is based on an application, ERAS application. What they look at are things like, you can see step 1 score was the most important thing they looked at. Letters of recommendation, your dean's letter, your step 2 score, your personal statement. These are not all the criteria, but I just took a snapshot of a few of the top criteria. Once you get the interview, it's a totally different game. Now you've been selected for the interview, you're there, you're showing up. As you can see, they grade you based on your interactions with the faculty, your interpersonal skills, how you work with the other residents during your interview. How did you, interact with them? Did they like you? Did the feedback that they got back from the residents? These are all, and they still look at your scores, by the way. Again, this doesn't represent all the programs. Every program has different criteria. Some programs will look at step 1 score through the whole thing, and that's all they're using as their criteria. Other programs will look at other criteria, but this is just kind of a general snapshot. I want to leave some time for question and answers, so I'll try to go through this quickly. This is really the unofficial, unspoken tips and tricks that you need to know. Programs do have score filters, and they will not tell you what those score filters are. Programs get 3,500 applicants, and they cannot look at 3,500 applications very thoroughly. Perhaps some of the more well-funded program like Massachusetts General Hospital, these are very well-funded top institutions in the world. They will review more or less every application in detail. But it's extremely competitive to get into those, and you better have a near perfect application, because they take about 60 residents every year and only 1 international graduate. So you really need to be at the top of your game to be reviewed by a program like them and given an interview. But that being said, most of the programs, let's say 95% of the programs in the country, are not going to review your application. They're going to put a score filter. And that score filter varies. Some programs will say anybody with a score below this gets filtered out. We're not going to look at it. Other programs have a lower score filter. So it depends. Different programs have different thresholds. So the question is, what do I do if my score is below? I've done my best. I really studied hard. I'm a smart student, and I wrote the exam, and you're writing an exam in a language that's not your first language. For some people, they learn medicine in a different language. They have to kind of relearn it in English. Even if you've learned medicine in English, multiple things can happen to make you not perform your best on the exam day, and that's not the end of the world. So there are other ways that you can get yourself known. Getting US clinical experience. So you'll see what I've written there is real rotations versus shadowing rotations. A real rotation is where you're officially enrolled with the program that you're going to do this rotation with you. Let's say you're going to the University of Chicago and you're part of the rotations at the University of Chicago. You're enrolled as a rotating student. The program director meets you, you're attending the educational rounds. It's very different than shadowing rotations. Shadowing rotation means I know a doctor who works at the University of Chicago, and I'm going to call him or her, and I'm going to ask them, can I join you? And the doctor frequently is given the privilege to be able to bring somebody with them. This rotation has value, but not as much value as the real rotation. So you really must work hard or try your best to get the real rotation. Because when you get a letter of recommendation after the rotation, when it's officially part of the program and you're getting a letter from the program director or the chairman, or you're getting a faculty letter, like a departmental letter, this looks a lot better than one physician that you're following. And the other advantage of being part of a real rotation is the real rotation, you get to meet the other residents, work with the residents, work with other medical students, work with a lot of staff, versus a shadowing rotation. You're just following this physician around. It does have value, and if that's all you can get, that's okay, you should take it. But really getting the biggest bang for your buck is getting that real rotation. And I mentioned their Cleveland Clinic, they offer international rotations at a cost, but you could look into that. Quality letters of recommendation, don't just check the box, yep, I got my 4 letters. It matters. A thorough, personalized, long letter. I shouldn't even say the word long, but unfortunately, they do look at the length of the letter. Somebody who has a 1-page letter is not the same as somebody who has a 5-page letter. If a professor is writing a 5-page letter about you, it means a lot to the program director. Even if they're not reading it in that much detail, they'll just look and say, they'll look at the letterhead, the top, when I say letterhead, like the university stamp at the top, they look at the university stamp, they look at the length of the letter. Wow, this guy or this girl has a 5-page letter from Harvard. You know, this is why I say this is the unofficial rules. This is the truth. Programs are, it's not their fault. They're inundated with thousands of applications, and unfortunately the review is expedited, and these are the things that catch the eye. When you have a letter from Johns Hopkins, from UCSF, from these big institutions, and it's a long letter. So make sure when you're getting a letter, it's not just a letter. Many people go and say, can you write me a letter? And the person will say, sure, I'll write you a letter. And the letter will say, you know, Dr. So-and-so is a good doctor and he works hard. Unfortunately, in a competitive environment where 50% of IMGs don't match, just saying that you're nice and you work hard is often not enough. You need to be able to get more personal letter with examples of how you worked hard and how you stood out compared to your peers. It must include a statement saying you are in the top 5, 10%, 1%, whatever it is, but it must include a statement like that. So these are things that you should watch out for. The name of your medical school matters. So find people, graduates from your school who are in residency in the US, or if not from your medical school or your medical university, find graduates from your country in the US. See which institutions, if you're from Peru and you see that one university here in the US is taking a lot of people from Peru, that means they had a good experience with Peruvian graduates and they think Peruvian graduates have done good things in their program. And so they are more likely to look at a Peruvian graduate. And this applies to any nationality. Also Spanish speaking, there are a lot of Spanish speaking areas of the US. So if you are a Spanish speaker, you may want to choose to do rotations in that area and show yourself there, because they do look for people speaking different languages. There's areas in the US where they're looking for Arabic speakers or different languages. So really geography matters. I did talk about the Dean's Letter already. Build your brand, and build your relationships. At the end of the day, I have seen people with very low scores match into super competitive specialties because they present themselves well, they speak well, they built a CV, and they built relationships. The number one thing that will work above all of this, no score filter will prevent a program director from interviewing you when they receive a call from their good friend who is also a program director somewhere else saying, this young man or woman is very strong and they'll be an excellent resident. So build relationships. Build relationships with everyone along your path as you pursue this path. Whether you're studying with somebody and you have a study partner, whether you meet somebody along the interview trail, whether you meet, just build relationships, be genuine and meet as many people as you can through this path. Everyone will shed some light. Finally, I want to say the truth about this. So I said the official, the unofficial, now the truth. Many very qualified people apply more than once until they match, and that's just okay. I know people that have applied 5 times, 6 times, but they matched. When you're going through this, understand that the system is not perfect, and the system is designed to make sure that all the residency programs are filled. It's not designed for you or me to match. It's designed for the programs to get filled. And it's okay not to match. And it can be painful. I have had friends who've gone through some 5 applications, 5 years in a row applying until they get in, but they do get in. A lot of IMG's international medical graduates match in rural areas. Many match in big cities like New York City, of course, but many match in rural areas. Be prepared to be open-minded about geography, where in the US you're going to be. Try to get the best USMLE score you can. If you don't get it, just be innovative, work hard, and be persistent. Don't believe anyone who tells you they can guarantee you a spot in residency. No one can guarantee you a spot. Build relationships. And honestly, I have been on this path for many years. I have yet to see one person who doesn't match at all. I've seen people apply 5, 6 times in a row. You will get it. Just persistence is the only guarantee to success, is persistence. There are many roads. I just want to close with, there are many, many, many paths that you can take. Doors were closed and doors will open along the way. Just because you get a no from a research position you're pursuing or from a residency program today does not mean it's no forever. It just means no today. That's a yes tomorrow. Keep knocking on the doors, keep working hard and working smart. And thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, that's my contact information, social media and email, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, Tarek. Thank you so much for your time and your wonderful presentation and all the details. And I believe you make really valid points about this. So we have a question right now from Cesar. He's asking, do you know any specific internal medicine programs that might be, that may prefer Peruvians? He's asking that. I will say maybe Florida, in Florida, you know, we have Spanish as a here from a big Latin American community. Also New York. Hans is asking already. He already is from Peru and he's a current student. He's a resident too right now. But Tarek, I would like to hear your inputs about this.
Is this about the same question where the residents, where Peruvian medical students match usually?
Yes, where could be might be selected.
I agree with you, Alma. I think it's Florida, a lot of the Spanish-speaking areas. I think, I don't remember any off the top of my head, but I've definitely come across programs where you see the list of residents and there's numerous people from a specific country. And I think in Illinois, there was a program that took Peruvians preferentially, but I can't recall off the top of my head. The best source would be your medical school dean would know where people ended up, or some of your colleagues. But off the top of my head, I just know general regions, and I agree with you, Alma, New York and Florida.
I also know Texas too, now that I remember.
Correct. Southern California, I think also there's a lot of Spanish speaking in Southern California. Like I said, Chicago and Illinois, there's a huge Spanish speaking population and a demand for Hispanics. I think those are the major regions, but to be specific about Peruvians, you're going to have to maybe email me later or message me on social media, and I can try to find out for you.
Great, thank you. And then Tatiana is asking, can you apply to residency during your final medical school year?
You can, and that's how, as long as you've met all the requirements, and as long as your graduation date is going to be before, so residency typically in the US starts in July. The match day is going to be March. They definitely want you to have graduated before February when the rank list goes in. So for a lot of international students, that doesn't quite work. US medical graduates, that's how they do it. They apply during their final year. It's super competitive. If you think your CV is ready and if you think you have everything ready, go ahead and do it. The system, you know, they'll take your money, they'll take your application, but they want to be sure that you will have a complete degree by February of the coming year. So let's say you're applying in September this year, you have to have a guarantee or be able to demonstrate that you'll graduate with your medical degree and be fully ECFMG certified by February. If you're not sure about that, I would take an extra year and be productive in that year instead of spending your money with no guarantee, maybe even going to interviews and then not successfully matching because of this.
Correct, thank you. And then we have another question from Javier. He's asking if it's harder to apply for surgical or neurosurgery residents.
Surgery gets very competitive, neurosurgery even more so. I think in the whole United States, there's like 50 positions, 50. The whole country only takes 50 neurosurgery residents in a year. A very small number, maybe 80, but it's a very small number. Neurosurgery is extremely competitive. General surgery in and of itself is extremely competitive. That being said, they will look at things. You need to start looking at that document, charting the outcomes, but focus on the surgery lines to see what their requirements are. You need to get high scores. That's one. But what matters more for surgery is connections. You need to really spend some time. It's not one of those things you're going to graduate from your home country, finish your exams and apply. Even if you have a score in the top 1% of the world, you won't necessarily match into surgery. You do need to spend time in the United States building connections with people. I know many people who have matched into surgery. I think I only know one international graduate that matched into neurosurgery, but somebody did it. So if that's what you really want, that's fine, but you just need to understand that this will take time from you to come here, spend time getting to know people, whether it's through research or other opportunities, and you need to hustle. And that process can take a few years, but if it's what you want, you will get it. You just have to understand the beast that you're up against. Whether that beast is internal medicine, pediatrics, neurosurgery, you just need to understand what you're up against and have those expectations in line. I've even seen people who match into surgery with very low scores because they spent 4 or 5 years building relationships and getting to know the chair of surgery here and the chair of surgery there, and they did research in this university, and now they have this letters, and they really built a phenomenal profile. And you know what? Sometimes that's the better path. Sometimes you spend those years and you become a better person. You become a stronger person. You become more resilient. You learn so much more skills. And by the time you match into the specialty that you're interested in, you're like, wow, I have really, I really grew as a person. So understand what you're up against and put your all into it.
Great. Yes, I completely agree. And doing rotations will help you a lot. Get to know people and stand out in your work. That's really important. And then we have another question from Hans. He's asking, can you mention a little about your experience in cardiology research those 3 years? Was it a clinical or lab research?
My experience was a clinical research. The lab that I was involved with was actually an academic research organization. What that means is they didn't function on NIH grants or government research grants like most research groups do. They actually provided academic research services to pharmaceutical companies. So we were involved in research operations, but on an academic level. So when these huge cardiovascular trials that come out with like 20,000 patients, usually they need the pharmaceutical companies need an academic group to help with the study design, and it's kind of like a consulting group. So I worked for an academic research organization. It was extremely productive. Pick your mentor, pick the lab that you're going to join, because of course, it depends what your goal is. I think from a research perspective, the more productive the lab is, the more opportunity you have to learn and to publish. So, I was very fortunate that my PI published, he himself published over 100 papers a year, some years. So it was a very productive group. The other side of that is usually these large productive groups, they have a lot of fellows, a lot of researchers, a lot of fellows at different levels. And so there's a hierarchy that you have to work your way through until you become a more senior researcher. Versus a junior researcher, you could be their only fellow and all the attention is focused on you and mentoring you. So it's totally different experiences. There's no positive or negative. With the junior faculty that you join, you may not publish as much, but you may get a very strong relationship with this person that may be able to help you, or just kind of have a mentor, a true friendship with a junior faculty. Versus if you're working for a very senior faculty, they may not have as much time to give you that one-on-one mentorship, but you get a broader experience. So that was my experience, and feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss more. I know a lot of the research labs in Boston, and I've collaborated with some of them, so I can share some more details with you.
Great, thank you, Tarek, for that. And then Jelanis is asking, in which time of the application process do we need to sign up for the National Residency Match Program?
You apply in September. So you sign up for the ERAS. This is the actual CV system. That opens usually around July. It opens, but the programs cannot see it yet. It opens in July. In September, it submits. That's when the programs can see it, around the second week of September usually. And then the NRMP match is like $100 fee to participate in the match. And that one, you can do it anytime, I think from October, anytime from October until like the rank list is due in February. So the only reason you need to pay the NRMP fee and to join that is to put in your ranks. It's so funny because it's two separate systems. The application to apply is a separate system from the system that you use to put the ranks. So you obviously only rank the places that you've interviewed at. But so that one, you have to just do it before February is the deadline. And I think the earlier you do it, it's cheaper. And then if you delay it, there's like a late fee or something, but you can do it until I think January or February, around there.
Great, thank you. So now Leticia is asking, Dr. Nafee, now the step 2 CS is suspended for 18 months. And the ECFMMG is offering the options like DELF. Do you think that presenting to the match without the step 2 CS will be a disadvantage?
This is an unprecedented time. I don't know, everybody's worried about this. What do we do with that? Will it be a disadvantage? It's tough to tell. What I can tell you is we already know that American medical graduates are going to match CS or not. They're going to match. They don't need ECFMG certification. They can, so the American medical graduates are in. That doesn't affect us. What affects you is because they're going to match. Now you have whatever spots are remaining, which is a lot of positions. Like I said, 55% of of the residency spots are filled by international graduates, for internal medicine, that is, by the way. It's not the same for other specialties. But the remaining spots, I presume that if you're competing against another international graduate their application looks similar to yours, except the fact that they have the CS, they will be at an advantage over you. But we don't know, because now there's a huge number of people like you who cannot do the CS. So you're not alone. That's the comforting part. You're not alone. There's a huge number, and they will have to take people who don't have the CS yet. They will have to interview people and work with them to figure something out, because if all these people who haven't done the step 2 CS are not going to match, then programs will remain unfilled. So is it going to be a disadvantage against those who do have it? Probably. But if you have a good CV, a good connection, and a great step 1 and step 2, then perhaps you will still get through. Time will tell. Unfortunately, we don't have an answer, and coronavirus has kind of changed the way we do everything. So we'll have to wait and see.
Great, thank you, Tarek. And then other question from Jelani is, do you think that taking a step 3 will improve your chances of matching?
Many programs don't care, but many programs do. I know many of the New York programs, they care about step 3. If you are pursuing an H-1B visa, which is typically the 2 main categories of visas offered are J1 and H-1B. There are some exceptions for EB-1 and O-1. Those are for people with like exceptional research abilities, and they have like 50 publications or something. Maybe not necessarily even just by the number of publications, but the impact of their publications. If you have a New England Journal publication, you could qualify for EB-1 or O-1 visas. But otherwise, the H-1B and the J-1 are the 2 main types. The H-1B, you have to have step 3 in order to qualify for that visa. It's an immigrant visa, whereas J-1 is a non-immigrant visa. Other than visa issues aside, the step 3, it can't hurt. If you already have great step 1 and step 2 scores, don't bother. Don't take the risk of not getting such a great score in step 3. If you don't have amazing scores, maybe it's a good idea to take step 3 in an interview. If somebody asks you, how come your step 2 CS score or CK score, is not phenomenal, you can say, I don't know what happened, but I took step 3 and I've done very well. So yeah, it can help. It doesn't hurt. Many programs don't care. Some programs do. That's what I can tell you.
Yes, and also some programs care because they have to give you time to study for it and pay for it. There's like a law for that, some of them. So it's better to have it before, I believe. Also, we have another question from Leticia, from Juan, who is saying, great talk, it's really inspiring. If one were to do research fellowship, what are the potential funding options?
It's a very good question. It's a question of the century. if there are, depending on where you're from, some governments, some people's home countries will fund them. I know some Europeans are able to get funding through their governments. Some people from the Middle East are able to get funding through their governments. I know for a while, Brazil, the government of Brazil was funding a lot of people to come and, do a research endeavor here in the US. There are other options. There are international funding entities. I have known they become more competitive. I have known people that went through foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. If you're interested in infectious disease, you could do infectious disease research. They have some scholarships. Sometimes the university that you're going to, for example, Harvard Medical School, if you're doing one of the master's programs, sometimes there are some scholarships available or financial aid. For a master's degree also, you can always, even as an international, student loans. I know that that's not something that a lot of us are used to in our home countries to get student loans, but in the US, this is very common. all US medical students take student loans. Some people do it that way. And finally, the best way of all is to be employed. How can you be employed is on a research fellowship if you can get a paid position. That being said, paid positions are few and very competitive and often require some research experience. So what many people do is they first join and they're funded themselves, like through family support or something, for the first like 6 months in a research lab in Boston or wherever they go, sometimes at Yale or something. And then they get a paid position after that. So you work 6 months, the PI gets to kind of see your skills and how hard you're working, and then they can decide whether to pay you or not. That being said, I know Harvard accepts unpaid research fellows. I think Yale University requires that all research fellows be paid. They will not accept unpaid positions. So that's what I can tell you. There's, a lot of resources, but they're also very hard to come by and very competitive. The best way to go would be to find a PI who's willing to pay you, either from the beginning or after a few months of you working with him or her and showing your hard work.
Great. Thank you, Tarek. And I forgot to mention that for the H-1 visa, since you need a step 3, that visa allows you to then apply for the green card, the residency here in the United States. That's why it's different from the J-1. And for the same reason, the H-1 visa is more expensive compared to the J-1. Just to make that note. And you can look at the program, what type of visa they offer. If you go to FRIDA, you can find what type of visa the residency program offers before applying. And then we have another question is how to get real rotations as a medical student. Are there any specific programs? This is from Tatiana from Londrina.
There's no specific, so any hospital that you can think of, you can contact their graduate medical education office and ask about student clerkships, visiting student clerkships. Not all universities, hospitals have that set up, but usually most large university hospitals have it. So I know that they do it for a fee sometimes. I know, for example, that Tufts University does it. It costs a fee. I know that Mass General Hospital does it. It costs a fee. I know that you could do it at University of Chicago. I know most universities have some system for a visiting medical student to come, so long as you're still a medical student. They will tell you what that process is like, and there are forms that you need to fill out and your medical school needs to fill out. So there is a process in place. What that process is differs from institution to institution. And I know that some people, and Tatiana, I'm not sure which medical school you're from, but some international medical schools have a partnership with at least one university in the US where they have been sending students. So I would start with talking to your dean or somebody in your medical school and see what they can guide you. And then other than that, you just need to go on the internet, go on different universities in the US on their websites, contact their GME office, email them or give them a call, find out the process. They usually have a student clerkship coordinator, and you can talk to them and they can tell you what the process is. Of course, everything right now has changed because of coronavirus, but perhaps they can help you schedule something in the future. Let's say 6 months from now, who knows what things will look like.
Great, thank you, Tarek. And then we have a question from Melissa. She's asking, do you know if doctors already specialized, for example, in cardiology, can enter the US healthcare system without doing the residency program? Is there an alternative for a specialist to enter the system?
So this is a very good question. I'm glad that somebody asked this. I'll mention two things. First, there's no official system for that, but it happens. How? I don't even know how that happened, but I know personally, I know about 4 people who have accomplish this exact same thing you're talking about. There is no formal process. There is no like path that is well described. I'll tell you two people I know, the way one did it in anesthesia, one did it in, or two did it in cardiology, and one did it in anesthesia. All three of those people went to huge academic medical centers, worked there in research. They were already very highly functioning cardiologists in their own countries. And with a huge factor of luck, I assume, somebody was able to pull some strings with them and get them a medical license. They are not board certified. Board certification in the US is like a membership to like a medical board. So board certified in American Board of Cardiology. They're not board certified because they didn't do any training in the US, but they were still able to get them a medical license sponsored by that institution. The two cardiologists that I know that did this, both of them came out of Duke University, which is an enormous cardiovascular institute, probably one of the best in the world. They both went there. It came from Italy and the other one came from Brazil. And they're doing incredible, both of them are, doing amazingly, both in research and in clinical practice. I mean, just kind of leading the generation of cardiologists. So it is possible. The anesthesiologist that I know also did a similar pathway, and their institution, even though he does not have a board certification, that institution, it was University of California in San Francisco. They decided to sponsor his medical license. I don't know what that process looks like because it's not described anywhere. You will not find it anywhere written, but it is possible. It requires luck, connections, and a lot of hard work, but so I'll mention that. I do want to mention one more thing, nephrology, kidney doctors. So nephrology in the US, it's usually a fellowship after internal medicine. Most fellowship programs are unfilled. Nephrology fellowship programs, I would say like 90% of them are not filled. They have open positions. There is a low demand for nephrology in the United States. The reasons are beyond me. It's a discussion for another day. Many people I know who are internal medicine specialists in their home countries or nephrologists in their home countries have applied to nephrology fellowship, bypassed residency, and went directly into nephrology. You can complete a 2-year nephrology fellowship. And after that, either, because again, you cannot be board certified without internal medicine training in the US. So after finishing nephrology fellowship, you have the choice of looking for somebody who's willing to hire you as a nephrologist without board certification. Can be challenging, or do it the other way. One of the people I know finished a 2-year fellowship in nephrology and then went back and now is doing internal medicine at the same program they matched in nephrology. The nice thing about that is you don't have to apply through ERAS. At the end of the fellowship application cycle, so many programs are unfilled. You just need to email all the programs who have open nephrology positions, and you can actually get offers from very top institutions because they're unfilled. Even the top institutions are unfilled often. So if your interest is nephrology, and if you already are an internal medicine specialist or a nephrologist, you have a very straightforward path if that happens to be your interest. But you have to already be specialized, and it's not 100% guarantee, but there is a path forward.
Great, thank you, Tarek. And then we have another question from Pablo Cortez from Manaus, Brazil. He's saying, in some of your slides, you mentioned the field of research industry, and you mentioned the case of startups. Can you talk a little about how the field of research applies to this?
Yeah, I mean, the research industry, I personally have not worked with startups, but there are a number of startups, like numerous startup companies. When I say startups, I mean, like, for example, I know a guy who's starting an app. It's kind of like Uber, but for like emergency medicine. So like instead of, let's say doctors and nurses have the app, and then you can call the app and somebody can come perform, like assess the patient or do a CPR. If somebody, let's say in your apartment building, if they're not feeling well, they can order a doctor and you can go respond to it. This is a startup company that somebody's starting. There are numerous this is just one example. There are numerous startups out there, and for example, these new portable EKG devices. I know in Oklahoma, there's a professor of cardiology who started a company where they have a little kind of USB device that you can put your thumbs on and it can give you an EKG. So you could always reach out to one of these organizations if you happen to know about a startup that interests you and is in your space, and you understand now after PPCR, or maybe you have some background knowledge about some of this research, you can always contact them and show an interest in their products. And and then oftentimes companies working with medical devices or new medical platforms that are supposed to improve care, they're interested in having someone with an understanding of research because they want to show that this device works. So they have to do some research studies, and they do have to kind of collaborate with researchers. So there's that. Also, I know somebody who worked in ophthalmology at Tufts University in a research lab, actually. And then him and the PI was working in optical coherence tomography or something like that, some imaging device for the eye. And they came up with a technology and they started a company. And the research fellow who was initially thinking he was going to apply for ophthalmology residency, decided he wants to get into this field and is now the CEO of this company as of last year. Him and the professor from Tufts started it together. So do I know specific companies for you? No, because I don't know what field you're interested in, but I know that people have done that. So always, when you put yourself in an environment, you will find opportunity around you. If you come to Boston and you're interested in biotech, there's a lot of biotech conferences and biotech meetings, and not just in Boston, everywhere really, in the US, every major city, in New York and Chicago, you can always find meetings to attend and connect with people. And again, I can't stress the importance of relationships, whether it's residency or startup or whatever. I mean, you really just gotta dive into the environment and build relationships with people.
Great, thank you, Tarek. And then we got another question from Tiago. Tiago, he's supposed to be here actually as a research fellow, but due to the pandemic, all those positions are on hold right now. And he's saying a lot of rotations have been postponed until further notice. In that case, what would you think will be our best option to get experiencers and lords if we want to apply this year?
Apply this year. I mean, there's 3 months left.
Yeah.
Again, any questions that are asked surrounding the pandemic and the effect it has had on our lives in terms of our future plans, it's very difficult for me to answer because unfortunately it's like, what can we do, right? It has affected so much, and I could tell you so much stories, but if we had time, of course. There are some online experiences you can participate in. I know that you can't get that clinical. I don't know if it's an ability for you to delay your application until things become clearer. You know your situation best. There are online things you can do. There's an organization called wikidoc.org. Wiki, like Wikipedia, but doc.org. It's an online medical textbook. You can participate with them in writing medical chapters. It's something to keep yourself productive. You can try to do some research with people remotely. I don't know if labs are accepting remote research, but you can try to email people and ask them if they're willing to work with you remotely. There's another medical education group called osmosis.org, and they do medical education videos. You can volunteer with them. I mean, the 3 pillars of academic medicine are research, clinical, and education. Unfortunately, you can't get the clinical, so in the US anyways. Maybe you can do something clinical in your home country that will help you. But the only advice I can tell you is focus on the education and the research. Though the education you can do remotely through these educational companies like Osmosis or wikidoc.org. These are nonprofit organizations that are doing educational efforts. You can tutor people in USMLE, or, it's the best we can do. It's not a perfect solution. Are you at a disadvantage having no US clinical experience? Probably. I'm not going to lie to you, but the whole point of this process is to look at your weaknesses, turn them around, and make them strengths. If you can demonstrate to a program that despite this global pandemic affecting everybody, including the program is affected, by the way, you can still be productive. It's the best you can do.
Great. Thank you, Tara. I completely agree with that. And then we have another question from Cesar. He's asking, what are the best opportunities that we can look for after finishing PPCR for building connections for matching in a good internal medicine program?
The best opportunities. It's tough to say what's the best, because the best for me is the different for the best for you. Some people, you finished PPCR, so now you understand the language of research. If you want to dive into more research, you need to start reaching out to principal investigators. I will say, if you are interested in pursuing residency, going into the research industry may not be the best idea. I'm not saying it's like a red flag, but generally speaking, residency programs want to see that you're still interested in academia, whether it's through one form or another. Industry might not be the best idea. So research, medical education, I already mentioned a few opportunities for medical education. This will help you build connections. Obviously, if you can do clinical rotations, that'll help you from a clinical perspective, but that's not really using your PPCR knowledge. But actually, when you're doing clinical rotations, when you find a professor, let's say you're doing clinical rotation in a university hospital, when you find a professor, you know a little bit about the language of research now, even if you're not an expert. Always be eager. Always offer your help for research projects. Researchers are always looking for junior people to help them with their projects. So if you happen to find yourself in a clinical rotation, whether it be in your country or here or wherever, always volunteer your time. Busy professors need people to do tasks that are maybe a bit tedious, but are very important. When I was doing my pediatric cardiology research fellowship, I was a medical student doing a rotation, and I kept nagging the fellows, the pediatric cardiovascular fellows and the attendings, like, do you have a project for me? Do you have a project for me? They gave me very tedious tasks of data collection and sifting through charts and collecting data and going and getting the blood and running it in the lab. And, maybe it was busy work that they just didn't want to do, but I'm glad to take that off their shoulders and get an opportunity. And you know what? Despite all that kind of busy work, I learned a lot. So what is the best opportunity? It's tough to say what the best is. If everybody knew what the best was, everybody would do that. But there are so many good opportunities. Find what you are passionate about and pursue that, because the best way you can impress somebody is when you're passionate about that. So if you're interested, if you're tech savvy and you like internet writing and you want to write online medical textbooks, do that. Through those organizations I told you. If you like research, pursue that. Of course, again, COVID pandemic has slowed down a lot of these things. Get innovative. Don't be shy to contact people. Ask. They can say no, but you can move on and you can ask again and you can ask again. Just don't be shy. If you think of an opportunity, Google it, find some people, email them, keep in contact.
Thank you, Tarek. Yes. And then we have another. Oh, Tatiana is saying, is this Dr. Renato Lopez from Duke University you were talking about? He's from Brazil.
Yes, Dr. Renato Lopez. He's
Yeah.
one of the cardiologists that I was telling you about. Yes.
That's great. And then people are saying thank you to you, Leticia, Giuliani, and then Fabio, and great tips. Any other questions, guys? I don't see any more. I am also checking the YouTube channel that we have with Professor Fregni here, and we don't have questions here. But you are more than welcome to open your mic and talk to Tarek directly. And
Please do. And of
yes,
course, if you're not comfortable asking the question, or maybe you haven't thought of a question yet, my contact information is there. I'm happy to answer questions after this as well.
yes. So as Professor had mentioned to you, he's more than happy to give you a letter of recommendation by the end of the program. He all the years do this for the students. Please just try to make your biggest effort in the program, work a lot in the group project, collaborate with your colleagues and TAs, and that's how you will show your potential. So don't be shy. And right now that we have the study period, profit that. You will learn a lot from this protocol development. And feel free to always email. And then Tarek is also, thank you for giving your personal information and help the students with this. Probably we'll get more emails after the presentation, and then we can route them to you.
Of course.
Then Cesar is saying, what is the difference between the top internal medicine programs and the other ones? Do you suggest focusing on those top programs, or just focusing in matching?
I mean, the top programs, the difference is their requirements are very rigorous. They don't typically take a lot of international graduates, but they do take. But I mean, let me give you an example just very briefly. Massachusetts General Hospital and Yale University. Massachusetts General Hospital, arguably one of the top in the world in internal medicine. They take like 1 to 2 out of 60 international graduates. Their USMLE scores are in the top 1% of the world, if not even higher, like top 0.5% of the world. So they have to score very high. They have they have done rotations at only top medical schools. So when they have done rotations in the US, those people would have done a rotation at MGH, at Brigham and Women's Hospital, at Yale, at Stanford. Their letters are all coming from this level of institution. They have this level of scores. They have published. They're very well spoken, and they have people advocating for them, making phone calls for them, and pushing for them. So that's the top. They do. It's possible, and if you want to work towards that, do it. You should. Aim for the top. You know, they say aim for the stars. Maybe you get the moon. And that being said, there are a lot of great internal medicine residency programs. It's not just MGH or Yale or Stanford or nothing. There are many between that and the worst program. So there's so much in between. I wouldn't, as an international graduate, I would not limit myself. I would apply broadly. I would work the hardest to make my application the best, and then apply broadly, and then see what interviews you get. You know, if you have like, I know people who are excellent. You know, one of my friends matched at Yale University last year. He got 35 interviews. 35. This is an unbelievable number. You know, he was canceling the interviews from how many he got. But he applied broadly. He also applied to middle tier programs. I'm not saying you should apply to every program in the country, but apply a little bit broadly. If you think you have an extremely strong application, maybe you don't need to apply to some of the less well-known programs, but I think it would be wise to apply a little bit broadly, and then take it from there, see what interviews you get. And then from there, you can choose not to attend an interview. You're not obliged to attend or to rank. Even you can attend an interview and you didn't feel like you clicked with the program or the location or the city that it was in, and you don't have to rank every single place that you interview.
Thank you, Tarek. And then we have another question from Javier. Does the letter of recommendation should be from USA physicians?
I know people that have gotten letters from outside of the US, and that's fine, but there should be some letters from the US, absolutely. Like out of the 4 letters, there should be some from the US. I don't know if there's really a cutoff, but if I was to advise you, I would say at least 2 should be from within the US, if not all 4. Of course, it depends. If you are at a very big medical school that's very well known, I don't know your background, but like some international medical schools from USP or something, like maybe there are a very big professor that is well known in the US in that field that you're applying, and maybe that letter will have some weight, but to the best of your ability, the letters should try to come from the US. And keep in mind, by the way, geographic region matters. For example, if I have a letter from the New England region, I am more likely to get interviews from this region. If I have letters from New York, I am more likely to get interviews from New Jersey, New York, versus if I have letters from California, I will get more West Coast interviews. Typically, for whatever reason, these geographic, if I can recognize, if I'm the program director and I can recognize the name of the person writing you the letter, or they're close by in a nearby institution, it shows me that there's a tie. Also, it's your responsibility as an applicant to kind of convince programs that you have a geographic tie to the area. If you have family members in the area living there, whether it's a cousin or spouse or kids or something to show a geographic tie to the region, this makes the program more confident that by granting you an interview, you are likely to rank them highly. Just as much as you want them to take you, the program wants you to rank them also. So these are things to keep in mind, and having letters from that region and from the US shows a tie to this place. This is important to a lot of programs.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question from Jolanis. Can the LORs be from research or only clinical recommendations?
Definitely they can be from research. I certainly used a lot of research letters because a lot of my experience was in research, but there must be clinical letters. And you have to understand that a specialty like internal medicine, like I said, for better or for worse, internal medicine itself, most programs don't really care about your research as much. Those top programs that Carlos was asking about, they care about research a lot, but they're also very competitive for international medical graduates. So you're kind of stuck in this catch-22 situation. The best of the best programs really care about research. The other programs, not necessarily. But then also the best of the best programs have so much more requirements beyond just research. So use a research letter, but make sure that you have very, very strong letters commenting on your ability to be an excellent clinician and an excellent resident, not just the research. So out of the 4 letters, please don't put more than 2 research letters. 1 is enough, especially if it's from a huge institution or you have made an amazing research accomplishment. 2 is fine. Do not go above that.
Great recommendation, Tarek. Thank you. And then that's what we got. There is no more questions, guys. Do you want to open your mic and talk directly to Tarek or type your question here? We'll also be happy to forward your question if you send them by email to him. He already shared his personal information. Or any other final comments, Tarek, to the students and TAs? We have also TAs joining.
Great. Honestly, the fact that you're all here at this stage already means a lot. You're all thinking about your future. You're all building upon it. Keep going. I want to say one statement that I put in the previous slide. That last sentence. Everybody gets there. It's a long path. Just stick to it. If you want it, stick to it. I know hundreds of people that have gone through this path. Some applied numerous times. It can be painful. Stick to it. Persistence will get you there. So best of luck, guys. I'm here, happy to answer more questions at any time. And I wish everybody the best of luck and all the success in everything that you want to do.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon, for your time and for your dedication to the program. And we hope that you can join in the future again as a faculty. We don't know yet how it will be this year for the 5 days, but of course that I will have you. And so that's all, and we will keep going. Next Wednesday, we'll have another lecture with Luis Castelo. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at Professor Fregni's lab, and he also did the MPH at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He will be talking to you next Wednesday at 5. And I will post the link, and see you guys, and enjoy the group project meetings. Thank you, Tarek. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.